And what is going on, everybody? Hope everybody's enjoying their Friday so far. We are back with another NFL mock draft now, with the season ultimately finishing with Super Bowl 60 this past Sunday. So our NFL draft order is now officially set. So we're going to be going through another mock draft here. I know that we did one a couple of weeks back just to see if there's going to be any changes, at least on my end. But we had the Senior Bowl just a couple of weeks ago. I know that we did one pre-Senior Bowl, but now we will have the NFL Scouting Combine along with all of the pro days with all these college football teams. So there's going to be a lot more that we're going to be learning about all of these prospective prospects, especially when we have the NFL Scouting Combine in a couple of weeks. But with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the top five and then the rest of this mock draft. So first off, let's go ahead and look at the updated top five, maybe even top 10 of the draft prospect 2.0. So we are on PFSN. I know that there is definitely a lot of other websites out there. So if you want to go to profootballnetwork.com, you can go do an NFL mock draft simulator yourself as well. But looking at the top five prospects, you have number one, Arvell Reese, the linebacker from Ohio State. At number two, you have Ruben Bain, the edge rusher of Miami. You have number three, Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback of Indiana. And then you have two Buckeyes at 4 and 5 with Carnell Tate, the receiver from Ohio State. And rounding out the top five top prospects is Caleb Downs, the safety out of Ohio State. We'll continue on here. You have Jordan Tyson at 6, the receiver from Arizona State. David Bailey is at 7, the edge rusher out of Texas Tech. At number 8, you have Jeremiah Love, the running back of Notre Dame. And then rounding out the top 10, you have Spencer Fano, the offensive tackle of Utah, at 9. And Keldrick Falk is at 10, the edge rusher from Auburn. So without further ado, let's go ahead and kick off this NFL mock draft with the Las Vegas Raiders being number one on the board. And I think that this is going to be a pretty simple pick. I don't think that this is going to be a team that's going to take too long once April gets here. I think that's going to be Fernando Mendoza. Obviously, that we saw this season pretty much blow up in the Raiders' face. No longer Pete Carroll there. Clint Kubiak, who won the Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks this season, is going to be taking over the head coach. And Geno Smith, that experiment did not work at all. So you get a guy like Fernando Mendoza, a stellar season in 2025, leading the Hoosiers to the national championship, winning a Heisman Trophy. I definitely think that this is pretty clear pick for Fernando Mendoza, landing out west in Las Vegas. So that's a pretty easy pick at pick number one. Now this is where I really think the draft really starts, because what the heck is the New York Jets going to do at pick number 2? Like I mentioned in my first one, if Dante Moore declared for the draft, it'd feel like this was a pencil in for two quarterbacks going in the first top 2 picks. But since Dante Moore is returning to Oregon, that is now unclear of what the Jets are going to be taking. So they're not going to be taking a quarterback. Looking at the quarterback, the best available quarterbacks outside of Fernando Mendoza, we have to look at Ty Simpson, the quarterback of Alabama. But they could go with pretty much the best available player. You look at the rest of their team needs. They need a defensive tackle, wide receiver, and edge rusher. To me, I'm just going to go with the best available player. I know that Arvell Reese is listed at number 1. But to me, if you get a guy like Ruben Bain, who's an absolute freak on the edge, this is exactly what the Jets need. This defense just needs a pass rusher, especially with the trades that they made, for one, to the Indianapolis Colts, with Sauce Gardner going to the Colts and Quinnen Williams going to the Cowboys. So this is a rebuilding team for the Jets, both on the offense and defensive side. They have another pick in the first round, so I think that their pick number 1 will go be the best defensive available player, where that's Arvell Reese, Caleb Downs. But here in this mock draft, we are going to be selecting Ruben Bain, the edge rusher of Miami, to take his talents to the Jets. So now let's go on to pick number 3, the Arizona Cardinals. This is a team, it's going to be interesting to see what they do at the quarterback position. Will they extend an offer towards Kyler Murray, or will they look to trade Kyler Murray and keep a guy like Jacoby Brissett, who's been on the roster for the past couple of seasons? But the Arizona Cardinals, their top needs is definitely offensive tackle. in guard. This is a team that definitely needs some help on the offensive line. They could also use another receiver, especially with Marvin Harrison not having that great of a season so far with Arizona. Michael Wilson, a guy like him, did step up. So going wide receiver like Carnell Tate or Jordan Tyson is definitely in the cards. But I'm going to give him the best tackle in this draft class, Spencer Furneaux, the offensive tackle of Utah. Utah has 2 elite offensive linemen in this draft class. So I think that Spencer Furneaux fits perfectly in. It really is a top need for Arizona. You need some offensive line help. Spencer Furneaux is definitely one of those elite offensive linemen that you can get early in this draft. So let's continue on in the top 5. We go down to the Tennessee Titans. They could pretty much go 2 ways with this. Go one of the best wide receivers in the country with either Carnell Tate or Jordan Tyson, or they help out their defense and get one of the top corners or even safeties in the class, like a guy like Caleb Downs, or they go with David Bailey. I do think they are going to help out the young quarterback in Cam Ward. Cam Ward struggled in his rookie season. You do have some talented young receivers led by Alec Aminor as well as Shamir Dyke. Dyke really had a fantastic year, but you do need another wide receiver piece. I'm going to give them Carnell Tate in this instance. I think that you can go pretty much either way here. Jordan Tyson, Carnell Tate. That's pretty much 1A and 1B in my opinion. So another weapon for the young quarterback in Tennessee as Cam Ward gets a new weapon on the offensive side of the ball and gets Carnell Tate into the fold. All right, let's go ahead and round out the top 5. We go to the New York Giants. And the Giants, this was definitely a team that won the draft last year, getting guys like Jackson Dart and Cam Skattebo. Cam Skattebo, unfortunately, did suffer an injury. And looking at their top needs, it's wide receiver. And you saw why the reasoning behind that being the top need for this team is that whenever Malik Nabers went down with an injury, Wan'Dale Robinson stepped up. But really, other than that, there was really no other competition. So I think that this is going to be another team that's going to attack the wide receiver position since Carnell Tate is off the board. We're going to give them the next best thing in Jordan Tyson, the wide receiver of Arizona State. Tyson had a phenomenal year, even though the Arizona State kind of have a down year overall in the Big 12. Sam Levitt dealt with an injury. So that offense overall struggled. But the bright spot in the Sun Devils offense this year was definitely Jordan Tyson. He could definitely make some big plays. And Jackson Dart, similar to Cam Ward, is going to get another offensive weapon to really help out this organization win some football games in a stacked division in the NFC East because you do expect the Washington Commanders to bounce back, and the Eagles and the Cowboys are going to really be the tail of the tape in the NFC East moving forward. So far in the top 5, you have guys like Mendoza, Bain, Furneaux, Tate, and Tyson going off the board. So now let's move on, continue here in the top 10 to go to the Cleveland Browns. This was a team that had all of their pretty much draft picks last year. This just feels like an organization that just has a boatload of draft picks in every single draft. Quarterback is their top need listed here. I don't think, especially in round number 1, that's not going to happen, especially since you have young talent like Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. So I don't think that they're going to go that way. It really feels like they're just going to go with the best available offensive tackle or even guard here. So let's go ahead and look at the guards. We haven't really looked at the guards. I don't think that Ione, the offensive guard of Penn State, would be an option. I think that we're going to see guys like Francis McGuey or Caleb Lemieux. I think that McGuey is going to be a guy that's really going to soar up drafts. So I'm going to have Francis McGuey. He was definitely a elite prospect out of Miami. One of the big reasons why Miami had one of the best rushing attacks led by Mark Fletcher. So Francis McGuey goes to a team that desperately needs some help on the offensive line, protect your young quarterback, whether that's going to be Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders. So Francis McGuey, I think that right now he was listed as the number 13 prospect overall. Like I mentioned, I think that once the pro days and scouting combines done, Francis McGuey is definitely going to soar up these draft boards and go inside the top 10. Let's continue on now to pick number 7. We do have the Washington Commanders, and the Commanders overall this season had a disappointing one led by Jaden Daniels. So he had several injuries. The wide receivers didn't really pan out. You had a guy like Deebo Samuel that really fared well. Then you had a ton of injuries to your running backs. Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt suffered injury, Austin Eckler as well. But I think that they are going to go with the best edge rusher, in my opinion. That's going to be David Bailey, the edge rusher of Texas Tech. So we're going to be getting David Bailey, the edge, going to Washington Commanders. You could either go with Arvell Reese, in my opinion, especially with Bobby Wagner being a free agent. I mean, Wagner is 35 years old. More than likely not going to be returning to this Commanders defense. So a linebacker is also a position of need. But David Bailey would definitely fit very nicely in this defensive front for the Washington Commanders. Now let's go on to the New Orleans Saints. Now this is definitely a team that could go many different ways. You know, maybe heading into this draft in the preseason, we thought that this team was just going to draft a quarterback. But with Tyler Shough performing like he did, you know, we saw Spencer Rattler be the starting quarterback for the first 7 games. The Saints only had 1 win, and then Tyler Shough comes in and really saves pretty much the season for the New Orleans Saints. But look at their top team needs: edge rusher, guard, and wide receiver. But I don't think that they're going to go with either of these team needs. I think that running back is definitely a position of need for the New Orleans Saints. So, you know, Alvin Kamara is not getting any younger. And looking at, you know, their running backs, you do have a guy like Kendrick Miller, who got injured, and then Devin Neal, who they drafted, I believe it was either in the 4th or the 5th round in last year's draft from Kansas. He had an okay season, but Jeremiah Love is definitely the best running back prospect in this class, and to be honest with you, it's not even close. So we're going to give Tyler Shough, the young quarterback in the Big Easy, give himself a running back, and we're going to see a nice 1-2 punch out of the gates between Jeremiah Love and Alvin Kamara. So Jeremiah Love, destination is New Orleans. I definitely think that the Kansas City Chiefs are not happy with the Saints, because I think that if Jeremiah Love makes it all the way to number 9, then the Kansas City Chiefs are more than likely going to be picking Jeremiah Love, especially with, you know, Kareem Hunt had an okay season, but Isaiah Pacheco just continues to falter at the running back spot. So the Chiefs could definitely go after a guy like Jeremiah Love here with this pick. So now let's go on to, speaking of the Kansas City Chiefs at pick number 9, you could definitely have the pick of the litter. Their top team needs are defensive tackle, edge rusher, and running back. Well, the best available running back went off the board, so more than likely not going to happen. You do have the 2 best available players at the team need position: Keldrick Faulk, the edge rusher of Auburn, as well as the defensive tackle of Peter Woods from Clemson. I do think that Peter Woods is starting to fall down the draft board, so I don't think that the Chiefs are going to look after him. Keldrick Faulk, though, looking at this Auburn defense overall, Auburn's, looking at overall team, their offense was pretty pathetic this season, but their defense really won them a majority of their games this season. I think that Keldrick Faulk was phenomenal for this Auburn defense. I think that it could definitely help them out at the next level, especially going to a very talented defense that is the Kansas City Chiefs. Now let's go on to the Cincinnati Bengals. This is definitely going to be a team that is definitely going to be looking after the defense. As you can see, their team needs is all defensive position players. If you watch the Bengals this season, it was pretty atrocious yet again. So you still have 2 of the best overall defensive players left on the board with Arvell Reese and Caleb Downs. To me, if it really gets to this, I just think that the Cincinnati Bengals are just going to look at who's their best available player. I think it is going to be Arvell Reese, the linebacker out of Ohio State. Now, Caleb Downs could also be an option for them, but I feel like Arvell Reese really fits into this system. So, I mean, you can't really go wrong with the Bengals. You just need any help that you can get on this defense that has really struggled the past couple of seasons. So help him out with the best linebacker in this draft class in Arvell Reese. Now let's go on outside of the top 10. We go now to pick number 11 with the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins, another team that can really go any other way here. Their top need is corner, and the top corner is still available, Mansour Delane out of LSU. They're not going to go quarterback here because, like I mentioned, I just don't think that Ty Simpson is going to go this early in the draft. Could go a guard, tight end, or receiver, but I am going to give them the best cornerback in this draft class, at least with the rankings, Mansour Delane, the cornerback out of LSU. Now, Delane coming from Virginia Tech to LSU, and looking at LSU's defense overall as a top 25 defense in all of college football. And Delane was a superstar once again for the Tigers secondary. So, plugging in play in Miami, I think that he's going to be day one. He's going to be a starter on this Dolphins defense, especially with Jalen Ramsey getting up there in age. I definitely think that Mansour Delane could definitely help out that secondary moving forward. Now let's go ahead and go now to pick number 12. I think that you're going to get a couple of teams now where you really need defense to really help all of those organizations. So now we go to the Dallas Cowboys. Their top three team needs: linebacker, corner, and edge. To be honest with you, Caleb Downs still here for the Dallas Cowboys just makes too much sense for me. So that's exactly what I'm going to be doing, giving Caleb Downs the safety of Ohio State. Downs overall, his collegiate career was fantastic, starting at Alabama, then transferring to Ohio State, won a national championship. He's just been an absolute beast. And if you need a center fielder on your defense, Caleb Downs is definitely the one for you. And the Dallas Cowboys defense had some games where they struggled. They do have some talent on that defensive unit on all the fronts, but I definitely think getting a guy like Caleb Downs moving forward would help out this defense tremendously, help out their offense, because that offense has a ton of talent led by Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb. And if they do pick up George Pickens, who is going to be a free agent, that offense is going to be, once again, pretty dang good in the NFL. All right, now let's go on to pick number 13, the Los Angeles Rams. I don't believe that this is going to be an offensive player. If it is, then they're going to go with an offensive tackle and Caleb Lemieux. But still one of the best cornerbacks available, Jermon McCoy. Now, McCoy is definitely going to be interesting. He didn't play a single snap in 2025 due to an injury. But if you look at a 2024 season, it is about as sensational as you can get. The tape is definitely there. Like I mentioned, coming off of the injury is definitely going to be a concern for a lot of scouts. But Los Angeles Rams definitely need some help in the secondary. You saw in their playoff run. They struggled mightily defeating, a couple of the best wide receivers in the league. So Jermon McCoy fits very nicely in this Rams secondary. Now let's move on to pick number 14, and that is the Baltimore Ravens. A new regime in Baltimore, new head coach, a new offensive coordinator. But I definitely think that this is either going to be a defensive player. Looking at their top team needs: edge rusher, you have guard, and defensive tackle. Let's go on now to the edge rushers. Your top edge rushers are Akeem Mesidor. I mean, I love Mesidor, but I think that Mesidor more than likely is going to slide all the way down to a day 2 pick. But I just think that this is going to come down to either Peter Woods or Caleb Banks, in my opinion. And like I mentioned, I think that Peter Woods is falling down the board just a tad bit. But I think that the Baltimore Ravens are just going to look at his pure talent, because Peter Woods is a top 10, talent coming into the preseason. That Clemson defense overall kind of had their woes this season in games. Peter Woods didn't have that great of a season, but if you look at 2024, I mean, the future is definitely bright if Peter Woods can figure it out at the next level and go to a very solid defense in the Baltimore Ravens. Peter Woods, I think that his fall ends here at pick number 14. Now let's move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a Buccaneers team that could definitely use some help on the defensive side. I don't think that this is going to be one of those few teams that does not pick offense in the first round. They drafted 2 really good rookie wide receivers in Emeka Egbuka and Tez Johnson in last year's draft. But Sonny Styles, to me, makes a lot of sense here for Tampa Bay. Your linebacker crew starting to get up there in age as well. Your defense is still very talented and young, but I think that a guy like Sonny Styles, along with like Caleb Downs and even Arvell Reese, that was the 3-headed monster for the Buckeyes defense this season. So Sonny Styles is going to head down to Tampa Bay. Now we go to pick number 16. This is the second time that we see the New York Jets on the board. If you were remembering back to pick number 2, Ruben Bain, the edge rusher of Miami. So like I mentioned, with going with Ruben Bain, I think that now this is going to be a wide receiver. And Mekhi Lemon, the wide receiver from USC, a phenomenal season with the Trojans. USC overall had a pretty down year overall in terms of expectations. But Mekhi Lemon, one of the best wide receivers. I believe he ended up winning the Blitnikoff Award over a guy like Jeremiah Smith, who's going to be in this draft discussion in next year. But, getting a guy like Mekhi Lemon, and overall, the wide receiver room for the New York Jets overall just really needs some help. Garrett Wilson, you could say he hasn't had, that elite quarterback in his career. But Garrett Wilson not the career that we had in mind for him. And outside of Garrett Wilson, not really too much help. They did draft Mason Taylor in last year's draft for the tight end position. But getting a guy like Mekhi Lemon, this is exactly what the Jets need. And, you get a guy like Ruben Bain and Mekhi Lemon, your first 2 picks. That's a pretty dang good draft so far for these Jets. Now let's move on to pick number 17. That is going to be the Detroit Lions. And the Lions feel like this is going to be a team that's going to draft some offensive line help. This offensive line is very talented. Like I mentioned, this is an offensive line that also needs some help as well. So you still have the best offensive tackle on the board with Caleb Lemieux. Looking at the center position, which we have not mentioned at all, don't think that any centers are going to be going off the board there. So we're just going to give them the best available offensive tackle, and that's going to be Caleb Lemieux of Utah. Like I mentioned, Spencer Furneaux and Caleb Lemieux, I mean, they were pretty dang good on the Utah offensive linemen. I know that Utah overall, another team that fell short of expectations, but this Utah offense led by Devin Dampier really had a good season. Now let's move on to pick number 18 is the Minnesota Vikings. This is a defense. I think that looking at their top 2 team needs, cornerback and safety. I think that we see another Clemson defensive player going off the board here at pick number 18, Avian Terrell, the brother of A.J. Terrell, who's on the Atlanta Falcons. So like I mentioned with this Clemson defense, heading into the season, it was supposed to be a very elite defense, but they had some games, especially when they got to ACC play, where they kind of faltered. But guys like Avian Terrell and Peter Woods have all the talent to be an everyday starter at the next level. So Avian Terrell going up north to play for the Minnesota Vikings. Now let's move on to pick number 19. This is where we start talking about some of our playoff teams, the NFC South champs, the Carolina Panthers. Last year, looking at it, we're picking in the top 10. They ended up drafting the Arizona wide receiver Ted McMillan, who ended up winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. So that was a phenomenal pick for the Carolina Panthers. But now they really need to focus either on getting one of the top tight ends, I think, in my opinion, and getting a guy like Kenyon Sadiq here, or focusing on the defense where they get an edge rusher or a safety or, hell, even a cornerback. So looking at the top edge rushers, you do have Akeem Mestor, like I mentioned. I just think that he's going to be a day 2 pick at this point. And then safeties outside of Caleb Downs, you do have A.J. Halsey. But I know that I did this in the first mock draft that we did, but I'm going to give them Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end of Oregon. Like, why not add another weapon to what has already become a very young and talented, receiving core for this Panthers offense? Like I mentioned, you already have Ted McMillan. And then you have Jalen Coker, who started the season on the injured reserve, but really stepped up, especially in even the one playoff game that they had against Los Angeles Rams. But Kenyon Sadiq, he's a monster tight end. So getting a monster tight end like that, helping out your offense, especially your quarterback and Bryce Young, is only going to help you win some football games moving forward. So the Carolina Panthers adding another weapon to Bryce Young's disposal. So now let's go on now to pick number 20, the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys, yet another team with 2 picks here in the first round. They went defense in their first pick. With Caleb Downs, the safety out of Ohio State. They could go back to the defense of really weaponry here, but they could also go with an offensive tackle here, Caden Proctor. That would make a ton of sense, and I think that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. I think that they go with defense, best available defensive player, and then they go with their best offensive line player to really help out protecting their quarterback and Dak Prescott. So Caden Proctor, he was, looking at the Alabama offensive line. Alabama's offensive line did struggle this season, but Caden Proctor was definitely a bright spot for the Crimson Tide, helping protect their quarterback in Ty Simpson. He's going to have to do the same when he goes to Dallas in protecting Dak Prescott. So that is our top 20. Now let's go ahead and move on to pick number 21. That's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that this pick will ultimately really factor in if Aaron Rodgers does come back for another season with Pittsburgh, because if Rodgers does come back, then I don't think that they are even going to be even close to touching a quarterback. Now, if Rodgers doesn't come back, then a guy like Ty Simpson is definitely going to be available here at pick number 21. But this is an offense that desperately needs some help at the wide receiver position. It felt like DK Metcalf and really nobody else set to really help them. So I'm going to give them another weapon at the wide receiver position, Casey Concepcion. He played his first couple of seasons at NC State, transferred before the 2025 season, went to Texas A&M. And you had a 1-2 punch at the wide receiver position for the Aggies this season. You had Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion. I mean, Concepcion, not only is he an elite wide receiver, but he'd also be a punt returner. I know that he had a couple of touchdowns in the regular season for the Aggies, so he could also play for the special teams for Pittsburgh. But like I mentioned, it feels like DK Metcalf pretty much had to put this wide receiver room on their shoulders. But I'm going to help out Metcalf here, give him a wide receiver 2. And no matter who the quarterback is, whether if it's Aaron Rodgers or the Steelers try and wait for a quarterback, maybe say like in round 2 or beyond, or maybe go after a free agent, you do need some weapons to help out whatever your quarterback is, and Casey Concepcion fits very nicely in this offense. So now let's go on to Los Angeles Chargers. It feels like this is going to be a team that's going to address some issues on the offensive line, whether that's guard or center. I'm going to give them the best available guard at this point out of Penn State, Ione. You know, Ione had a phenomenal season, even though that Penn State did not have the year that they wanted. You know, you did have the injury to Drew Aller early on this season. And after that, Penn State faltered during the stretch. Ione, still a lead prospect. I think he could definitely help out this Los Angeles Chargers offensive line that desperately needs it. Now let's move on to pick number 23. We see another NFC East team, the Philadelphia Eagles. This has been a team that has been drafting a ton of defense, whether that's on the line or their secondary. But looking at their top team needs, edge rusher, tight end, and guard. Looking at the best available tight ends, you did see Sadiq going off the board. The next one, though, is not till pick 60, Oscar Delp, the tight end of Georgia. So don't believe we will see any, tight ends going off the board here anytime soon. But I do think that they will help out their secondary. I'm going to give them Brandon Cease, the cornerback out of South Carolina. Philadelphia secondary, you saw with their departures, they had definitely had some games where they kind of faltered in that secondary. So get a guy like Brandon Cease. I know that South Carolina's defense overall wasn't that great, but Brandon Cease, along with Dylan Stewart, was one of the top key prospects in that South Carolina defense in 2025. So Brandon Cease going on now to Philadelphia. Then the Cleveland Browns back on the clock at pick number 24. We took Francis McGuey, the offensive tackle, out of Miami, so they already addressed one of their top team needs. I think that they're going to draft now a wide receiver, going to once again help out either Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel. Going to give him Denzel Boston, the wide receiver out of Washington. Now, Boston, definitely a big-time player. He's going to help out this Browns offense where your best really receiver in 2025 was the rookie in Harold Finn and out of Bowling Green, because Jerry Jeudy ain't it for this Browns offense. They just desperately need a new face of the wide receiver position, to be honest with you. So Denzel Boston makes a ton of sense at pick number 24 for the Cleveland Browns. We continue on with this mock draft at pick number 25, the Chicago Bears. And it feels like this is going to be a defensive type of player. Their top team needs are defensive tackles, safety, and edge rusher. You still have the two best defensive tackles still in this draft board with Caleb Banks, the DT out of Florida, and then Caden McDonald, the defensive tackle out of Ohio State. I think they just go with best available. To be honest with you, they're going to go with Caleb Banks, the defensive tackle out of Florida. Now, Florida's offense was pretty pathetic this year, but that Florida defense, similar to Auburn, really saved their season. I know that Florida didn't ultimately make a bowl game, but a guy like Caleb Banks had to get in the trenches. And, the Chicago defense was very improved from the 2024 to 2025 season. A main part of them winning the NFC North this season was how well that their defense played overall this season, and getting a guy like Caleb Banks help out your defensive interior and to be able to help against opposing run games, as well as getting to the quarterback. And Caleb Banks could definitely do that pretty well. Now let's go on to pick number 26. We have the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Buffalo Bills, one of those teams that could definitely need some help at the wide receiver position, especially with Khalil Shakir having another inconsistent year for the Buffalo Bills. Then you have Keon Coleman, who really hasn't done much for this Bills offense. You could also go with defense here. You see their top, defensive needs here is edge rusher, safety, and linebacker. So we did have a lot of wide receivers go off the board already. You still have Chris Bell and Elijah Surratt going off the board there. I think Buffalo can't really wait around for one of these wide receivers to still be there in their second round. So I'm going to go Chris Bell, the wide receiver out of Louisville. Louisville's offense overall did not have that great of a year, but Chris Bell definitely stepped up in big-time moments, and Chris Bell is definitely going to have to rise up to the occasion because, like I mentioned, Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir hasn't been able to do it on a consistent basis, and they're going to try to hand the keys over to Chris Bell and trying to be one of their top wide receivers. And when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen, can be pretty simple for the wide receiver position. Now let's move on to pick number 27. We do have the San Francisco 49ers. Now looking at their top team needs as wide receiver. Now this was a team that was definitely dealing with a ton of injuries, and especially to the wide receiver position. Juwan Jennings suffered an injury, same with Ricky Pearsall, and then George Kittle at the end of the season. He suffered an Achilles injury. So this is another team that could use some wide receiver help. You could go with Elijah Surratt here. But if I'm San Francisco, look at all this, linebacker and defensive tackle talent that is available to you. So I just think that they're going to go with the best available player, in my opinion, and that's going to be Caden McDonald, the defensive tackle out of Ohio State, and help out their defensive interior for this Niner defense. Now let's go on to pick number 28. We do see the Houston Texans now on the clock. Their top team needs are offensive tackle, guard, and defensive tackle. It just feels like another team that's going to be either help out their trenches, whether that's on the offensive interior or defensive interior. So let's go ahead and look at the top offensive tackles still available. You do have Monroe Freeling, the offensive tackle of Georgia. Looking at the guards, you have Chase Vicinitis, the offensive guard, Emmanuel Pernon, the offensive guard for Oregon as well. But Monroe Freeling, the offensive tackle of Georgia. Georgia's offensive line was pretty dominant this season on their way to the college football playoff semifinals. So Georgia, Monroe Freeling, another elite prospect on the offensive line. So the Houston Texans, they could definitely, add some talent to what has already become one of the best defenses in all of the league, but they could definitely use some help on the offensive line, protecting their quarterback in C.J. Stroud. Now we go on to the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams had an earlier pick in round number 1. They took Jermon McCoy, the cornerback of Tennessee. Now they're back on the clock at pick number 29. So now this could be another team that could get another weapon for Matthew Stafford. He already got Puka Nacua. What does Devontae Adams do in free agency? That is definitely going to be something to watch out for. But like I mentioned, the best offensive tackle right now, I'm not even going to pronounce his name, but they're going to be taking him, the offensive tackle of Arizona State. Why not trying to help out your MVP quarterback in Matthew Stafford, who is not getting any younger as the season goes on. So the offensive tackle of Arizona State goes off the board at pick number 29. Now let's go on to the last 3 picks in this NFL mock draft. We have the Denver Broncos. Their top team needs is a wide receiver, tight end, and defensive tackle. Now, it's going to be curious to see what they do with the wide receivers in the offseason. Like I mentioned, you do have Elijah Surratt still available on the board. But let's go ahead and give them one of still the best defensive tackles in this, the Texas Tech defensive tackle, Lee Hunter. Now, Texas Tech's defense, they spent a lot of money in the transfer portal, but Texas Tech's defense was one of the best in the Big 12 as well as all the country this season. Hunter, along with David Bailey in the interior of that defense, was a huge part in that. So Lee Hunter will now take his talents to Denver at pick 30. Now we have the Super Bowl teams. Starting off with the runner-up is going to be the New England Patriots, the champs out of the AFC. Their top team needs is edge rusher, linebacker, as well as tight end. So I think once you get to like pick 30, 31, and 32, these teams are just going to look at what's the best available player at the position of need. I think that's going to be C.J. Allen, the linebacker out of Georgia. Now the Patriots defense, this was a unit that going to 2024 to 2025, they took that leap to get him back to the Super Bowl. I know that everybody wants to talk about how good Drake May was this season, how good Stephon Diggs, Kayshon Boutte, list goes on and on. But the way that this defense was able to play was definitely a huge part in the Patriots getting back to the Super Bowl and getting a guy like C.J. Allen, who was one of the bright spots in that Georgia defense. I think that is definitely a really A-plus pick for the New England Patriots to end off this first round. Now let's go on to the Super Bowl champs, the Seattle Seahawks at pick number 32. Now this is looking at their top team needs is corner, offense, the center, guard, edge rusher, and running back. And like I mentioned, I said that Akeem Mesidor right now would be a day 2 pick. But if Seattle sees Akeem Mesidor on the board there, along with guys like TJ Parker, Keith Abney, Colton Hood, the list, they can pretty much get the pick of the litter. But in this draft, I will go with another Arizona State corner, Keith Abney, the second. Arizona State's defense, he was definitely the focal point of them in the 2025 season. And Seattle gets really another toy to play with in what is already an elite defense. So that will end our NFL mock draft post Super Bowl 60. So that is the full mock draft results. I won't go through all the 32 picks. Let's go ahead and go over really quickly at least the top 10. So at number 1, Las Vegas Raiders went with quarterback of Indiana, Fernando Mendoza. That seems pretty a vanilla pick as you can get. I don't think that it's going to be any other player. I would be shocked if it was. It feels like they're going to get their quarterback of the future. And Clint Kubiak, the new head coach, is going to have his franchise quarterback moving forward. And then at pick number 2, the New York Jets selected edge rusher out of Miami, Ruben Bain Jr. I think in my eyes, that's definitely the best defensive player in the draft. You could have an argument with Caleb Downs or Arvell Reese, but I think that Ruben Bain had a monster season and he's going to be a top 5 pick easily. Pick number 3, Arizona Cardinals, one of the first offensive tackles off the board, Spencer Furneaux, tackle out of Utah. Pick 4, we had to run on wide receivers, Carnell Tate out of Ohio State going to Tennessee. And then at 5, we had Jordan Tyson, the wide receiver of Arizona State, going to the New York Giants. And then at pick number 6, another offensive tackle, Francis Magui, the tackle from Miami. 7, we had David Bailey, the edge rusher out of Texas Tech. Jeremiah Love, the running back out of Notre Dame, going to pick number 8. Pick number 9, we had Keldrick Falk, the edge rusher from Auburn. So the Chiefs getting another defensive player. And then rounding out the top 10, we have Arvell Reese, the linebacker out of Ohio State. So that is it for our mock draft post Super Bowl. That is our second one. We'll definitely have another mock draft. I'll probably wait till after the scouting combine when we get another idea of these prospects, who's going to go rise up these draft boards and who could possibly fall down. We're definitely going to get a better look at all these prospects, who's going to be going in the first round just a couple of weeks once the scouting combine kicks off in Indianapolis for yet another year. All right, so I really appreciate everybody for tuning in to today's mock draft. Let me know who you have going inside the top 5. Let's see. Let's get to we do have a comment coming in here. Tying up. Let's go. Hopefully you like this draft pick. I ended up selecting Carnell Tate, the receiver from Ohio State, going to the Tennessee Titans. Cam Ward gets himself another young and up-and-coming wide receiver. So let me know what you think about that. And we will be back here probably in a couple of weeks for your mock draft 3.0 after the scouting combine is all said and done. And we will continue on with providing some more mock drafts as we get closer and closer to the 2026 NFL draft kicking off in Pittsburgh. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I'll see you back here next time. So long for now.